You hunt happiness as though it were a tangible quarry, flitting from one pursuit to the next, only to find emptiness at every turn. Schopenhauer would pause, tilt his head, and say, "Of course you're unhappy. You're chasing the will itself, because the will to live, insatiable by nature, ensures that every satisfaction is fleeting and every joy eclipsed by new craving. The more you grasp, the more slip through your fingers. The harder you strive, the more exhausted you become. True contentment," Schopenhauer argued, lies not in fulfillment, but in seeing through the will's deception. It lies in renouncing the endless cycle of desire, in finding repose in stillness, in glimpsing the beauty of mere existence without the need to possess it. Only when you understand that happiness is not a sequence of achievements, but a state of equanimity beyond craving, will you discover the calm that no external success can deliver. In the reflections ahead, we will illuminate 10 stark truths Schopenhauer laid bare, each one a blow to the illusions that keep you perpetually dissatisfied, and each one a key to unlocking a deeper serenity. Because happiness, in his view, is not found by getting, but by letting go. Desire's endless cycle ensures perpetual discontent. Schopenhauer observed that desire is not a path to fulfillment, but a treadmill that guarantees continual suffering. Each new craving arises to fill a void the previous one created. You believe satisfaction lies just beyond the next goal, an advance, a raise, a compliment, a new experience. Yet the moment you attain it, the thrill evaporates. The void yawns once more, beckoning you toward the next pursuit. This pattern repeats without end because the will to live, the blind, relentless force within you, thrives on longing itself, not on its satisfaction. You think you pause between wants, bask in the afterglow, reclaim peace. But Schopenhauer's critique cuts deeper. Satisfaction is itself a form of craving, for it almost instantly morphs into boredom or restlessness. That flicker of contentment lures you into thinking you have mastered your desires, only to yank you again into the current of wanting. Your life becomes a series of punctuated thrills, each followed by a trough of dissatisfaction. To see through this endless cycle, you must first recognize it. Notice your mind's pattern. As soon as one desire is quelled, another assertion rises. Label it. This is craving. By stepping back, you cease to be its victim. You witness the hunger rather than immediately feeding it. Next, cultivate moments of non-striving. Practice mindfulness of your breath, your body, your senses. In those moments, no future goal exists. There is only raw being. The void, temporarily held at bay, reveals that contentment need not spring from attainment, but from presence. Finally, redirect the energy of craving into creative expression. Instead of chasing new desires, channel that restless force into art, writing, movement. Let the will's intensity animate your creation rather than your consumption. In this alchemy, the cycle of desire does not vanish, but it transforms. No longer does it tear you forward, it fuels your own unfolding. Only by understanding that desire is a self-perpetuating torment can you begin to break its spell. Each time you choose observation over gratification, you weaken the will's grip. Over time, the treadmill slows, and you glimpse a deeper stillness beneath the surge of craving. The will to live is the root of all suffering. At the core of every human struggle, Schopenhauer located the will to live, a blind, ceaseless impulse driving you to survive, consume, and reproduce. Unlike a rational planner, this will is oblivious to pain, moderation, or ethics. It simply demands more life. From your most trivial wants to your loftiest ambitions, this inner compulsion propels you, indifferent to the sorrow it spawns. Suffering arises when the will's urges conflict with reality. Your body aches, your relationships falter, your resources wane. But the will knows no. It insists the next advancement will relieve your pain, regardless of the lessons previously learned. Thus, failure, loss, and frustration become intrinsic to existence as the will's cravings collide with the world's limits. Schopenhauer's bleak insight is that suffering is not an unfortunate byproduct, but the will's inherent cost. Every breath you draw is a victory over death, yet it harbors the seeds of decay, fear, and loss. Every achievement you claim fuels the will's appetite for the next conquest, perpetuating dissatisfaction. To confront this, you must see that the will to live, rather than life itself, is what births suffering. Liberation comes not by denying life, but by detaching from the will's imperatives. Through practices of renunciation, introspection, and ascetic discipline, you weaken the will's tyranny. You learn that existing with fewer cravings offers more tranquility than fulfilling them all. When you recognize that every urge springs not from necessity, but from the will's inexorable drive, you gain the power to choose. You can decide which impulses to indulge and which to renounce. In that choice, the will, once tyrant, becomes a tool, and suffering begins to wane. Chasing pleasure nets only temporary relief. In your frantic pursuit of pleasure, whether through food, sex, entertainment, or achievement, you seek a balm for the underlying ache of existence. Yet Schopenhauer warns that pleasure is but a fleeting echo in a vast chamber of pain. Each time you grasp it, it dissipates almost instantly, leaving behind a phantom of longing for its return. This transience ensures that relief is always provisional and that the very act of chasing intensifies the original suffering. Pleasure, being contingent on external conditions, is inherently unstable. You indulge in a luxurious meal and savor it for a moment. Soon, your hunger transforms into memory, and memory fades into emptiness. You achieve a milestone and feel pride. Within days, the glow pales, and you hunger for the next highlight. This volatility reveals pleasure's true nature, not a source of lasting joy, but a spark that flares and then flickers out, casting you back into the darkness. To break free, Schopenhauer suggests decoupling your sense of well-being from the appetites of the will. Instead of reacting to every temptation, learn to pause at its threshold. Observe how the initial promise of relief gives way to emptiness. In that space, ask, is this momentary lift worth the deeper crash? Each thoughtful refusal weakens the will's command. Simultaneously, deepen your capacity for disinterested appreciation. Find contentment not in consumption, but in observation. Notice the texture of a leaf, the hum of a distant bell, the cadence of your breath. These small immersions offer a subtler form of pleasure, one that rests in being rather than having. Over time, you develop an inner fountain of calm, far less volatile than the will's fleeting delights. When you understand that chasing pleasure is a hollow promise, you begin to seek a different refuge: presence. In this shift, relief becomes more sustainable, and the will's reign over your happiness loosens, granting you a measure of serenity no indulgence can match. External validation is a hollow promise. You yearn for others' approval, likes on social media, applause in the boardroom, admiration in your circle. Schopenhauer would hold up this craving as yet another expression of the will's insatiable hunger, a craving destined to feed but never sate. External validation is a brittle scaffold. You build your self-worth upon it, only to watch it crumble under shifting opinions and fickle fashions. When your mood hinges on compliments, you relinquish your inner stability to the caprices of the crowd. A compliment today elevates you, an icy glance tomorrow destroys you. Worse, in chasing validation, you sculpt yourself into a pleasing image for others, not a truthful reflection of your own depths. You become caricature, not character. To liberate yourself, internalize your sense of worth. Schopenhauer's cure is to cultivate self-confirmation. Derive your value from your own standards, not from the mob's applause. Define your principles: integrity, creativity, courage, and measure yourself against them daily. When you act in alignment with your values, you confirm your own worth, independent of any external verdict. Practice inner applause. Celebrate your smallest victories in private. Acknowledge each step you take toward growth, each act of kindness you offer, each boundary you assert. This internal celebration trains your psyche to trust itself rather than seeking strangers' approval. Finally, expose yourself to criticism, not to punish, but to test the strength of your self-regard. When negative judgment arises, observe the sting, then return to your own standards. Ask, Does this critique ring true to my values? If not, let it pass. If so, let it guide your improvement. By replacing external validation with self-satisfaction, you diminish the will's leverage over your contentment. You discover that happiness need not be a performance for the crowd, but a quiet satisfaction born of authenticity. In that realization, the promise of hollow approval gives way to the solidity of inner conviction. Avoidance of pain only deepens misery. In your frantic bid to dodge discomfort through distraction, denial, or self-medication, you believe you're protecting your well-being. Schopenhauer would call this tactic both natural and tragically counterproductive. Pain is the signpost your inner world uses to highlight what must be addressed. When you turn away, suppress the sting of grief, numb the ache of regret, sidestep the guilt of failure, you do not erase the pain. You merely bury it, where it festers and mutates into chronic anxiety, bitterness, and self-loathing. Imagine a wound left uncleaned. It may close over on the surface, but the infection grows beneath, eventually bursting forth with greater harm. Your psyche mirrors this pattern. Every avoided sorrow becomes a latent poison that seeps into your thoughts, coloring your relationships, undermining your vitality. You may think you've moved on, but the unresolved pain continues to shape your attitudes and choices, often in ways you barely recognize. True relief comes not from sidestepping pain, but from leaning into it, observing it with open curiosity. When grief swells, allow tears to flow. When guilt surfaces, name its source and atone. When regret gnaws, confront the decisions you made and forgive yourself. In each moment of direct engagement, the pain loses its power to control you. You discover that suffering, once acknowledged, begins to transform into insight, empathy, and renewed purpose. Aesthetic contemplation offers true respite. Schopenhauer elevated art and music to the highest refuge from the will's tyranny. In an act of pure, disinterested contemplation, when you immerse yourself fully in a painting's form or a symphony's resonance, you step outside the cycle of craving and aversion. You become a silent witness, free from the demands of personal desire. The will that normally thrashes for more, better, next, falls silent under the spell of beauty. This respite is not mere escapism. It is a profound reorientation of consciousness. You stop asking, "How can I possess this pleasure?" and begin to ask, "What can I learn from its presence?" The artwork or musical piece stands as an object of pure willlessness, an island where the storm of craving cannot reach. In those moments, you taste an inner calm untainted by want, a clarity deeper than any fleeting joy. To cultivate this practice, carve out time for unhurried engagement with art forms that stir you. Visit a gallery sans agenda, attend a concert without checking your watch. When you encounter a piece that moves you, forgo analysis. Let its shapes or harmonies wash over you. Feel how your breath slows, how your mind ceases plotting. In this quietude, you strengthen the capacity to stand apart from the will's demands, discovering that serenity is not a reward for achievement, but a gift of pure perception. Compassion releases you from self-absorption. Schopenhauer proclaimed compassion, the recognition of another's suffering, as the highest ethical response. When you are ensnared in the will's ego-centered orbit, your world shrinks to urgent self-preservation. Pain becomes solely your pain, and you grow increasingly isolated. But by extending genuine empathy to others, feeling their anguish as a mirror of your own, you shatter the self-absorption that fuels misery. True compassion is active, not sentimental. It means pausing your internal drama to listen to another's story, to feel their fear or grief without judgment. In that moment of shared human vulnerability, you see the universal architecture of suffering. You realize that your own agony is neither unique nor permanent, but part of a tapestry that binds all beings. Practicing compassion also dissolves your self-centered anxieties. Helping another does not drain you. It refocuses your will from endless craving to purposeful connection. Each act of kindness, whether a quiet word of understanding or practical support, weakens the will's grip on your heart and transforms suffering into shared strength. In comforting others, you comfort yourself. discovering that your own peace lies in the grace of giving rather than the hollow joy of getting. Renunciation of craving leads to equanimity. At the summit of Schopenhauer's cure for misery stands the radical renunciation of craving, the deliberate letting go of desires that compel you into suffering. Craving is the will's lifeblood. Each unfulfilled want stokes the fires of discontent. But when you consciously release these yearnings, whether for success, recognition, or sensory pleasure, you deprive the will of its fuel. Renunciation is not a one-time act, but a skill honed through practice. Begin with small vows. Abstain from checking your phone for a day. Fast from social media likes. Turn down an invitation motivated by fear of missing out. Feel the initial sting, then notice the expanding calm as the compulsion fades. Each momentary victory strengthens your capacity to endure greater renunciations. Over time, this discipline blossoms into equanimity, a steady mind that does not rise and fall with every whim. You become like a mountain, unmoved by passing clouds of desire and despair. In this sovereign stillness, you discover Schopenhauer's promise that true peace is not the product of circumscribed pleasures, but the quiet power of a will at rest. Solitude is sanctuary from the will's clamor. In the relentless din of desire, solitude becomes your only refuge. Schopenhauer extolled withdrawal from the world not as cowardice but as a courageous act of preservation. Preservation of the mind's clarity, the heart's calm, the soul's depth. Solitude is the space where the will to live, the ceaseless engine of craving, aversion, and anxiety, loses its echo. In silence, you no longer chase phantom pleasures or recoil from imagined pains. You simply are. To seek solitude is not to abandon life, but to pause the performance dictated by the will, turn off the screens, close the door, and sit with nothing but your breath. At first, the will protests. Thoughts rush, memories clamor, restlessness rises. This is the mind's tantrum, a final bid to sustain its grips of longing. Yet if you stay, something extraordinary happens. The noise recedes, and you discover a quieter layer of awareness. A witness that observes without judgment, that listens without needing to respond. In this sanctuary, you confront the raw textures of your own being. You feel sensations without naming them good or bad. You watch desires flicker like shadows without fueling them with action. You realize that the ceaseless chase was never life itself, but a distraction from the still center beneath. Solitude reveals that your identity need not revolve around achievements, relationships, or possessions. It can rest in the simple fact of presence. As you cultivate this practice, solitude becomes a well you can draw from whenever the will's tyranny rises. A 10-minute pause before dawn can recalibrate your day. A weekend retreat from the noise can reset your perspective. You learn that solitude is a skill, not a condition. It is an active choice to stand apart from the currents of craving and aversion. Schopenhauer believed that in solitude, one tastes the freedom denied by the will's demands. You glimpse a realm where suffering loses its omnipotence and where joy does not depend on acquisition. In that sanctuary, you build an inner fortress, not fortress walls of avoidance, but walls of serene presence, through which the will's storms pass without shattering your peace. Acceptance of life's inherent suffering brings peace. Schopenhauer's darkest truth is also his most liberating. Suffering is not an aberration. It is the very fabric of existence. To resist this fact is to wage a futile war against life's currents, generating only more anguish. True peace arises not from the elimination of pain, but from its radical acceptance, an embrace that transforms suffering from enemy into teacher. Acceptance begins with honesty. Notice the pangs of anxiety, the ache of loss, the sting of disappointment. Do not twist them into narratives of injustice or muster false positivity. Name the sensation. This is suffering. In that naming, the sting loses some of its charge, because you no longer amplify it with layers of resistance. Next, shift your stance from victim to witness. Imagine yourself as a traveler on a rough road. You still feel the bumps, but you no longer rail against them. You observe each challenge as a milestone that tests your resolve. This witness stance dissolves the self-centric drama of suffering, revealing instead a wider panorama, You are not alone in your pain. Every being carries its burden. Every life labors under the same weight. From this acceptance grows equanimity. You no longer equate peace with absence of pain, but with the capacity to remain centered amid life's upheavals. When sorrow visits, it does not unmoor you. It moves through you, leaving traces of insight in its wake. You learn that grief teaches compassion, that loss sharpens gratitude, that failure forges humility. Acceptance also action. Instead of seeking futile escapes from suffering, you choose responses that honor life's truth. You may still alleviate avoidable harm, but you do so from a place of calm, not frantic fear. Your choices become measured, your compassion more genuine, your creativity more profound. Schopenhauer did not promise perpetual bliss. He offered the possibility of freedom, freedom from the tyranny of resistance. When you accept suffering as life's constant companion, you stop being its prey. You stand unshaken amid the storms, your peace born not from the absence of pain, but from the serenity of the heart that no pain can drown.